It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in Denver, the kind that made everything outside my office window look like a watercolor in progress. The kind of day where emails stack up faster than you can read them, and the coffee never seems strong enough. I was halfway through reviewing internal audit reports for our pediatric outreach program when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it at first, probably another reminder to submit compliance forms or a group chat from HR about birthday cupcakes. But then I saw the name on the screen, Valerie. I froze. My sister and I hadn't spoken in months. Maybe longer if you didn't count the occasional forwarded meme or passive-aggressive holiday card. She was always the one too busy, always on the move, whether for a brand deal, a wellness retreat, or one of her infamous reset weeks where she'd go off-grid and reappear with clearer skin and a longer list of followers. Still, my thumb hovered. Curiosity beat out common sense. I answered. Her voice came through low breathy, too casual for someone who never called without an agenda. Marla, she said like she'd just run a mile. I know this is out of the blue, but I want you to be my maid of honor. I stared at the screen as if the words might rearrange themselves into something more believable. Valerie the influencer, the family favorite, the charming manipulator I'd spent half my life cleaning up after, was inviting me to stand next to her in front of 200 guests in Charleston, South Carolina. I know we've had space, she went on the kind of pause designed to sound mature and reflective. But I really want you there. You're my sister, and I want you to give a toast at the rehearsal dinner. She sounded nervous. Or maybe rehearsed. With Valerie, it was always hard to tell the difference. I let the silence stretch, thinking she'd take it back. That she'd laugh and say, "Just kidding, I meant Madison, our cousin, with the Pinterest-perfect handwriting." But she didn't. The words were still hanging in the air, delicate and dangerous. I should have said no. I should have asked why now after all the birthdays she'd skipped and the Thanksgivings she'd turned into content ops. After the years of being labeled the smart one, which was family code for the dull one, while she floated through life collecting compliments like sea glass. But instead, something small and stupid stirred inside me. That old version of me, the kid who used to wait for her to save me a seat on the school bus, the college freshman who once skipped a final to drive her home from a botched modeling gig, nodded before I could stop her. "Okay," I heard myself say. She gasped a little. "Really? Oh my God, Marla, thank you. I know things haven't always been perfect between us, but I want this to be different. I want us to be close again." She always knew how to use that word again, like we'd ever really been close to begin with. But part of me wanted to believe it. Part of me wanted to step into a version of our relationship that hadn't yet existed, where I was seen, valued, and maybe even loved for more than just being the reliable backup dancer in the story of her life. We wrapped the call with awkward enthusiasm. She promised to email me the itinerary and Pinterest board. I promised to clear my schedule. Then I just sat there, staring at the now silent phone, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Had I just agreed to walk into a beautifully lit trap? Probably. But some part of me, maybe the most foolish or maybe the most hopeful, needed to know what would happen if I stopped saying no, and finally stepped into the spotlight she had always reserved for herself. After all, it was just a wedding. What could possibly go wrong? Returning to Charleston felt like slipping into a jacket that no longer fit, familiar in fabric, but tight in all the wrong places. The air was heavier here, like it carried memory. I stepped off the plane with a suitcase, a stiff smile, and the kind of quiet dread that comes from knowing you're walking straight back into a dynamic that once made you small. The ride to my parents' house was uneventful silent, actually. Valerie had sent a car service sleek and black with a driver who didn't speak unless spoken to. Charleston slid past the window in postcard frames, Spanish moss cobblestone streets, pastel facades. But my stomach turned at every familiar intersection. My parents' home looked the same shutters, same potted ferns, same front porch swing that Valerie and I used to take turns claiming like it meant something. Mom answered the door in pearls and a pale blue blouse. Her hug was tight but not warm, like she was trying to close a suitcase that wouldn't quite zip. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling back. "You look..." Well. That pause before well said everything. Dad walked in from the kitchen holding his phone. "Dinner at Oakentide is at 6, he said, not looking up. "We can't be late." Valerie reserved the private room. "No hi, no glad you're here, just logistics." I set my suitcase by the stairs and swallowed the familiar lump that rose in my throat whenever I stepped foot in this house. "She's been so excited to see you," Mom said, and I wasn't sure if she meant it or just knew it was the right thing to say. We arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early because Dad believed early was on time, and on time was disrespectful. The hostess led us through a velvet-curtained hallway into a private dining room lit by warm pendant lamps. There were candles on the table and a flower arrangement that looked like it cost more than my entire week's salary. Then Valerie walked in, like a scene from a show, white jumpsuit tailored to perfection, hair curled into effortless waves, makeup glowing but subtle enough to seem natural. She was followed by a trail of friends, beautiful, buzzing, well-dressed satellites orbiting her son. "There she is," Valerie squealed, arms flung wide like she was greeting a celebrity. "My big sis." She pulled me into a hug that smelled like peonies and high-end toner. "It's been way too long," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Seriously, guys, Marla's the reason I didn't drop out of college. I owe her my life." Everyone awed. I smiled, or at least I moved the muscles that usually made that shape. "You look amazing," she added, stepping back to survey me. "Wait till you see the dress I picked out for you. It's so you." Later that evening, back at the house, she led me into the guest room where her stylists had lined up all the bridesmaid dresses like trophies. She handed me one in a zippered bag. Seafoam green, she beamed. Timeless, right? I unzipped the bag. The dress was beautiful, sleek, elegant, and a size 2. I hadn't worn a size 2 since junior year of college, and even then it had taken stress, heartbreak, and 2 months of protein bars. Valerie tilted her head. "Oh," she said lightly. "You haven't gained weight, right?" The room went quiet except for the sound of my own pulse. She wasn't asking, she was stating, claiming, "I mean, if it doesn't fit, we can get something close overnighted. Might not be exact, but we'll make it work." I just assumed. She trailed off, fluttering a hand. I nodded slowly, zipping the dress back up. "No worries," I said. "We'll figure it out." What I didn't say, you knew exactly what size I wear. This wasn't an oversight. It was a message. Dinner was as choreographed as any of her influencer videos. Valerie made toast with sparkling cider because she didn't want to bloat before the wedding. Her friends laughed at all her jokes. The photographer she'd hired to capture candid memories snapped staged photos while she rested a hand on my shoulder like I was a prop. When dessert came, she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't forget you're giving your toast at the rehearsal dinner, not the reception." Too many cameras at the reception. I want it to be intimate. Intimate, right? Because nothing says intimacy like 150 people and a 3-camera setup. That night, lying in bed in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. Charleston used to feel like home. It was where I scraped my knees on sidewalks and kissed my first boyfriend and cried after college decisions. But now, it felt like a film set. Everyone here had a role. Valerie was the bride. Mom was the gracious hostess. Dad was the indifferent executive. And me, I wasn't sure anymore. The supportive sister, the background character, or maybe just the cautionary tale. But one thing I did know, I didn't belong here. Not in this version of the story Valerie had written. Not in a dress that didn't fit. And not in a house where silence spoke louder than welcome. If Charleston had welcomed me with tension, then Friday night's engagement dinner wrapped it in gold foil and called it celebration. The private event was held at an upscale rooftop restaurant with string lights, champagne towers, and a hired string quartet that played instrumental covers of pop songs. Everything was pristine, down to the embossed place cards and the flickering votives timed to turn on just as the sun dipped below the skyline. Valerie stood at the center of it all, practically glowing in a floor-length champagne gown. She laughed, floated, glided across the room, surrounded by compliments and cameras. You could almost forget she was capable of venom. That is if you didn't know better. She waved me over when I arrived, her eyes already shimmering from too much flash photography. There she is, she squealed, linking arms with me like we were the final 2 contestants on a reality show. My rock, my sister, my favorite person in this whole room. Her voice carried. Guests turned their heads. I smiled. I always smiled. She raised a flute of rosé and clinked her glass against mine, looping her other arm around my shoulder. Everyone, she called out, "Can I have your attention for just a moment?" A hush fell. Forks paused midair. Valerie stepped onto a low step, near the head of the table. "Tonight's not just about me," she said. "It's about the people who got me here. And no one kept me grounded like my big sister Marla." A few gasps of recognition, some cooing sounds. My mother reached for a tissue. She was the serious one, Valerie continued, the achiever, the grown-up. While let's just say, I took the scenic route. Laughter. But she never gave up on me, even when I was too stubborn or stupid to know better. She turned to me, eyes shiny. "Marla, I wouldn't be the woman I am today without you. Thank you for always being there even when I didn't deserve it." The crowd erupted in applause. My mother dabbed both eyes. My father smiled like he'd just read a quarterly earnings report with good projections. And me, I stood frozen, trapped inside a compliment I hadn't asked for. Because I knew what this was, a performance, public affection, private distraction. Later that night, after the plates had been cleared and the wine had loosened everyone's tongues, Valerie ushered the bridal party to a nearby courtyard for what she called candid memories with the photographer. The lighting was perfect golden hour magic, with just enough haze to make everyone look like an influencer. She handed me the bridesmaid dress, the one that still didn't fit right despite an emergency tailor visit, and told me to change into it for the pre-wedding mood shots. I didn't argue. I just nodded and stepped into the venue's powder room to squeeze into the thing. It was tight at the ribs and unforgiving at the hips. I tugged the zipper as far as it would go and told myself I could survive a few photos. But as I posed beside Valerie under the vines, something gave way. I heard it before I felt it. Rip! Right at the seam of the hip. I gasped. A breeze hit my skin. I reached back instinctively, but too late. The photographer lowered his camera. Valerie spun toward me. "Oh no," she gasped loud enough for the courtyard to hear. How embarrassing for both of us. Everyone turned. I stood there exposed and helpless, one hand gripping the torn fabric, the other gripping nothing. Someone handed me a wrap. I wrapped it. I smiled through it. I joked about my love of cake. But Valerie, she wasn't embarrassed. She looked satisfied, like something had gone exactly the way she planned. After the shoot, I changed back into my own clothes and sat by the venue's outdoor bar, nursing a ginger ale. Valerie was busy reviewing the preview shots with the photographer giggling, pointing, posing again. Her entourage huddled around her, offering commentary like they were producing a documentary. Aunt Bernice slid onto the bar stool beside me. "Your dress okay?" she asked. I nodded. Seam gave out. She raised one eyebrow. "That kind of thing doesn't just happen, honey. Not with custom tailoring." I said nothing. She sipped her drink. "You see it yet?" I looked at her. "See what the setup," she said softly. "She doesn't want a maid of honor. She wants a fall guy." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. I wanted to deny it, say Aunt Bernice was overreacting, but deep down I already knew. That night, back in the guest room, I stared at the dress laid across the bed. Valerie had offered to have it restyled. I declined. Instead, I looked up flights. Nothing left that night. Nothing early enough to be invisible in the morning. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Something was shifting, cracking. The image Valerie had so carefully maintained of sisterhood, of shared memory, of innocent chaos was starting to peel. And underneath it there was something cold, calculating, something that didn't just crave admiration, it demanded control. Saturday morning started with a scream. I had just finished brushing my teeth in the guest room's bathroom when I heard it shrill high and theatrical, enough to stop my heart. "Oh my God," Valerie wailed. "No, no, no, where is it?" I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Several bridesmaids were already gathered around the dressing room down the hall. Voices overlapped shoes, clicked someone was filming. And there was Valerie Mascara, smudged robe slightly open her hands, flying through a velvet-lined box that had once held her jewelry. "It was right here," she sobbed, gesturing at the counter. "My grandmother's bracelet, the antique one. From Milan. $12,000. Gone." The room shifted like it had just inhaled. I stood frozen in the doorway. Someone said, "Did anyone else come in here this morning?" Another girl murmured, "I was only in to drop off the dress steamer." Then Valerie's eyes landed on me. "You were in here earlier, weren't you?" she asked, quieter this time. Almost soft, I blinked, to grab my charger. "That's right," she said, nodding slowly. Marla was the last one in the room. And just like that, the air changed. It wasn't a direct accusation, but it didn't need to be. I felt it before anyone said a word, the weight of suspicion. The bridesmaids didn't make a scene. Of course not. Valerie's crowd was too polished for that. But I caught at those glances too quick to be kind. The polite, brittle smiles. The new space that formed between them and me when we walked together toward the brunch terrace. The absence of trust is louder than betrayal when it arrives in silence. Later that afternoon, while Valerie was getting her nails redone for the third time that weekend, she pulled me aside near the florist's tent. Her tone was casual, too casual. "Hey," she said, chewing on a cuticle, "I just wanted to say I know it wasn't you." I said nothing. She tilted her head, all sincerity. I mean, it's just, you know how it looks, right? That soft smile, that let's just move on voice. I told them not to make a big deal about it. These girls get worked up over nothing. Worked up over nothing. A missing $12,000 heirloom bracelet. And yet somehow she was the one comforting me. I nodded slowly. Thanks for clearing it up. She shrugged. No worries. It'll turn up. But I knew it wouldn't. Because this wasn't about a bracelet. This was a test, a trap, a setup dressed as concern. The shift was subtle, but it settled into the bones of the weekend like damp air in a dress lining. Chelsea, the bridesmaid who once begged for my banana bread recipe, now barely said hello. Sophie stopped tagging me in her Instagram stories. My mom, who had been teary and affectionate at dinner, now avoided long eye contact. She offered me decaf instead of regular coffee the next morning, like she didn't trust me with caffeine. Only Aunt Bernice seemed unfazed. She sat next to me at lunch and whispered, "Careful, honey. They're writing a new story, and you're being cast as the villain." That night, I wandered into the garden alone. The estate grounds were quiet. Most of the bridal party was off-site for spa treatments. I found myself in a stone courtyard near the back edge of the property, half lit by flickering sconces and framed by trees that creaked in the wind. I needed air, silence. But even the moonlight felt watchful. I kept replaying Valerie's words in my head. You know how it looks. She hadn't accused me, but she'd let the space grow. The bracelet didn't need to be found. It had already served its purpose. And I realized this wasn't just sabotage. It was storytelling. Valerie wasn't planning a wedding. She was producing content, crafting a narrative, and if I wasn't careful, I'd be edited into a role I never auditioned for. The rehearsal was the next morning. I wore a navy dress I brought from home, simple, structured, and entirely mine. Trevor looked tired. Valerie looked polished. The officiant made a few dad jokes that landed awkwardly. And then it happened. Midway through the run-through, a man in khakis and a security badge stepped onto the lawn and approached me. Miss Covington's heads turned. "I'm Officer Danvers, estate security. I just need a moment of your time." I blinked. "Now won't take long," he said, stepping aside, hand hovering near his belt, like he was used to intimidation doing most of the work. I followed him behind the event tent. He pulled out a notepad. "Mind telling me where you were last night?" "Between 11 and midnight, I was asleep," I said. "In my room." "Anyone with you?" I shook my head. He nodded, scribbling. "You have access to the dressing room." I exhaled slowly. "So this is about the bracelet." He didn't respond, just stared. I stared back. "Am I a suspect?" "No one's calling it that," he said. "We're just gathering facts." Of course they were. Just facts. Facts that had been fed to them on a silver platter. That night, after helping Valerie zip into her reception gown, an ivory-beaded thing she insisted made her look like a chandelier, I spotted something that made my breath catch. She'd left her makeup bag open on the bed, and there tucked inside the mesh lining was something small. A keycard. With a label in faint black marker, "Guest RM205, my room." I froze. My fingers moved before my brain did. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. Click. There it was, proof. Not just a coincidence, not just bad timing. This wasn't passive-aggressive. It was strategic. She had a copy of my room key. And she wanted me to know it. There's a specific kind of cold that seeps in when you realize someone close to you has built a narrative, crafted, rehearsed, and ready to roll, and you're the villain in it. Not because you deserve to be, but because it makes them look better. That was the cold I felt as I stared at the photo on my phone. The photo of a room key. My room key. Labeled in Valerie's handwriting. Tucked inside her makeup bag like a weapon hidden in plain sight. I didn't say a word, just helped zip her dress, smiled on cue, and walked out of the suite like my spine wasn't buzzing with betrayal. The rehearsal resumed on the lawn. I stood where the planner told me, right side 2 paces behind the maid of honor's mark, and followed the motions. Valerie's voice floated around like confetti. Let's get the timing right this time. And Trevor, maybe stand straighter. Trevor looked blank. I hadn't noticed it before. The way his eyes flicked sideways when she gave instructions. How he smiled with only half his mouth. It was like he too had begun to sense something off. Something scripted. The rehearsal wrapped, and we were ushered inside for refreshments. That's when Officer Danvers returned. Same beige khakis, same notepad. He cleared his throat beside the hors d'oeuvres and gestured for me to follow him again. No one said anything, but I felt the shift in the room as I moved toward the exit. The way heads tilted, the way conversations dropped to whispers. Just tying up a few loose ends, he said as we walked toward the back patio. I nodded, trying to appear unbothered while my pulse tapped out Morse code against my ribs. He glanced down at his notes. We confirmed you were seen entering the bridal suite Friday night around 11:30. Correct. I hesitated. I dropped off a steamer. Valerie asked me to. She remembers it differently. Of course she did. I tilted my head. So what's the implication here? That I took the bracelet and then helped her zip into a 4,000 reception gown out of guilt? He didn't answer, just scribbled. You have a key card, he asked. Yeah, I said, issued at check-in. 1 key. I keep it in my wallet. You didn't make any spares? I frowned. No, why would I? He shrugged. Just asking. Just asking. That phrase again. It had beginning to sound like just accusing in lowercase. I exhaled sharply. Listen, if you really want to know where the bracelet is, maybe check Valerie's bouquet bag. He blinked. Why I paused. That flash of instinct kicked in. Don't show your cards too early. Just a hunch, I said quietly. You wanted loose ends, right? That night, I didn't go to the cocktail mixer at the wine bar downtown. I said I had a headache. Valerie didn't push back. Probably relieved not to have me in the frame. I stayed in, locked the door, double-checked the lock. Sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, wondering how long this game had been in play. How long Valerie had been planning the takedown. It wasn't just about the bracelet, it was about control, erasing my credibility, making sure that if I ever dared speak the truth, no one would listen. And she almost pulled it off. Almost. I opened my laptop and pulled up the photo again. Zoomed in. You could clearly see the marker label Guest RM205. My room, not hers, not a bridesmaid's. Mine. I emailed it to myself, then backed it up to my cloud drive, then sent a copy to Eli just in case. Then finally I breathed. My phone buzzed. It was Eli. Eli, my best friend, my tether to reality, the one person who'd seen every messy, exhausted version of me, and still picked up the phone at 2 a.m. I answered. He didn't say hello. You sound like you haven't slept in 3 days. I smiled even though he couldn't see me. Close. You okay? No. A pause, then softly. You want me to drive down there? No, I said, but I need you to listen. I told him everything, the key card, the accusation, the way Valerie's voice softened when she lied, the way everyone else's voice got quieter around me. When I finished, he exhaled into the phone. You can't let her get away with this. I don't think I have a choice, I said. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Yes, you do. You just need a microphone. And just like that, the thought was planted. A seed of possibility. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow. Valerie had asked me to give a toast. She thought it would be sweet, safe, predictable. But I was done being predictable. Later that night, I passed Valerie in the hallway. She smiled like nothing had happened, asked if I liked the coral flower arrangements, gushed about how flattering my rehearsal dress would be. Then, as I walked away, she added, Thanks for not making things awkward today. You handled everything so gracefully. I turned back, met her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled and said, I know. But in my head, I was already writing the speech, and she had no idea what was coming. I almost didn't go. Saturday morning came with heavy clouds and heavier thoughts. I sat on the edge of the bed in my robe, my dress hanging silently by the door. The house buzzed with last-minute chaos flowers, arriving late hairstylists running behind the caterer, calling to confirm head counts. And yet all I could hear was Eli's voice in my head. If you don't speak, she wins. Say what needs to be said, but say it on your terms. I stood up slowly, took one last look at the mirror and thought, no more silence. Not this time. The rehearsal dinner was held at a historic inn just outside Charleston, all white wood and wraparound porches, with magnolias framing the garden like something out of a southern novel. Guests laughed over sparkling wine and mini crab cakes. The string lights cast everything in gold. Valerie floated between tables, radiant and rehearsed. Tonight's going to be perfect, she told the planner. And why wouldn't it be? She had the venue, the groom, the camera crew, the perfect guest list, and a sister who had always played her assigned part, quiet, dependable, ignorable. Not anymore. About an hour in, the clinking began. Someone tapped a fork to a glass. A hush swept the room. Valerie took the mic with a flourish. Hi, everyone, she beamed. I just want to thank you all for being here, my favorite people in the world together in one room. And tonight we get to hear from someone very special. She turned and smiled at me. My sister, my rock Marla. Polite applause. Valerie stepped down. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands not quite. I took the mic, looked out at 150 faces, some warm, some expectant, most curious. I saw Mom sipping her wine, Dad checking his watch, Aunt Bernice giving me a small, firm nod. Valerie settled into her seat, smiling wide, waiting for the script to continue. But I didn't pick up her script. I brought my own. Good evening, I began, voice calm. I let the silence hang for a second too long. Families teach you love. They teach you laughter. They teach you loyalty. Another pause. But sometimes they also teach you silence. A rustle in the room. And in that silence, I continued lies grow. And grow. Until they take root in your identity. Until you can't tell who you are anymore because you've been edited to fit someone else's story. I looked at Valerie. She was still smiling, but her eyes had narrowed. Just slightly. I was always the quiet one, the practical one, the one who made things easier. Laughter from the back. Someone called out. Stiller, I nodded. Yes. And for a long time, I believed that made me strong. That biting my tongue, shrinking myself, absorbing everyone else's mess, that was what love looked like. I glanced around the room. Faces leaned forward now, glasses untouched, a fork slowly lowered. But silence isn't strength. It's survival. And it doesn't last forever. I took a breath. There comes a moment when the truth stops asking to be hidden. Valerie sat straighter. Her smile froze. Mom's wine glass lowered. Aunt Bernice folded her hands in front of her. "I've always supported my sister," I said, even when it meant missing work, even when it meant biting back my own opinions, even when it meant being misunderstood again and again. I turned slightly toward Valerie, and this week, I was given a role I never agreed to play. Gasps, not yet. But the room was quiet, heavy. She said I was the last person in the room, that I must have misplaced something of value. A sharp inhale from the table nearby. I let it hang, and I said nothing, because I thought maybe if I keep quiet just a little longer, this will pass. I stepped forward slightly, but then I found something in her makeup bag. Valerie flinched, tiny but visible. I held up my phone. I took a photo of a key labeled to my room, not hers, mine. Whispers began. She had a copy of my room key, the one I didn't give her. Now came the shift. The guest turned toward Valerie. Some whispered. A bridesmaid gasped. I kept going. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I'm saying it because my silence has protected the wrong people for too long. I glanced at Trevor. He looked stunned, as if something he suspected had just been confirmed in front of everyone. I closed the speech slowly. I hope this wedding brings joy, I truly do, but I will not carry the weight of other people's lies anymore. I handed the mic to the event coordinator and walked away. Behind me, the room erupted not in applause, but in noise. Chairs scraped. Voices clashed. Valerie stood up. "That's not what happened," she called out, voice rising. "She's twisting everything." But people weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. And that was the shift I'd waited for my whole life. Out on the back veranda, I exhaled. My hands shook. Then I heard clapping. I turned. Aunt Bernice, slow, deliberate smiling. She walked over, hugged me tight, and said, "Took you long enough." After my speech, I didn't go back into the dining room. I stood alone out on the porch, breath sharp in my lungs, gripping the railing like it could anchor me to something solid. The air smelled of magnolia sea salt and scorched tension. Somewhere inside, someone was crying. A door slammed. Another guest gasped. I didn't care who. For once, I wasn't responsible for cleaning it up. The truth was finally out. Or at least part of it. But I knew Valerie. She wouldn't fold. She'd spin, cry on cue, tell a new version of events that made her the wounded party. She was too good at it and too practiced. That's why what happened next stunned me. "Excuse me." I turned to see a woman in staff uniform standing at the far end of the porch. Mid-50s, quiet eyes, name tag Gloria. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, gently approaching like someone who didn't want to startle a wounded animal. "But I saw what you did in there." The speech. My posture straightened. "Yeah." She glanced behind her, then back at me. "You didn't steal anything, sweetheart." The words hit like a breeze breaking heat. "What?" She stepped closer. "The bracelet. Valerie's heirloom. It wasn't lost. It was planted." My heart skipped. How do you know that Gloria didn't answer right away? Instead, she pulled a small flash drive from her apron pocket. The cameras caught everything. 15 minutes later, I sat alone in my room with my laptop open. The door was locked. My hands shook slightly as I plugged in the drive and waited for the folder to load. A single video file. Ballroom cam 312 11 p.m. MP4. I hit play. The footage was grainy but clear, black and white. Timestamp in the corner. Midnight Friday. There was Valerie. In her silk robe, barefoot. She moved into the dressing room alone, glanced around, looked directly up at the security cam, paused, and smiled. That smile chilled me. She opened a side bag, the bouquet bag, unzipped it, then reached into her robe pocket and pulled something small and shiny. The bracelet. Delicately, she slipped it into the bouquet bag's outer pocket, zipped it closed, and placed it neatly on the bench. Then she turned, fixed her hair in the mirror, and walked out. No panic, no forgetfulness, a performance. I rewound the video 3 times. Each time my stomach flipped. The timestamp confirmed it. She staged the whole thing. A day before the discovery, she planted the bait. She hadn't just accused me, she'd built the trap. And worse, she looked directly at the camera. She knew it was recording, so why? And then I understood. She never expected the footage to be used against her. She thought she controlled the narrative, even the footage. She'd likely planned to find the bracelet later. Maybe during the reception on camera, surrounded by teary bridesmaids and a forgiving fiancé. It must have slipped in here by mistake, she'd say. Cue applause, cue Instagram story, cue sympathy, likes, engagement, monetization. It wasn't about me. It was about her brand. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. My ears rang. This wasn't just a lie, it was a lie weaponized for social clout. One that cost me my family's trust, my dignity, and very nearly my sanity. But now I had proof. Not just my word, not just a hunch. A video. Cold, clear, undeniable. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. Eli called just as I was uploading a copy to the cloud. I answered without thinking. Still breathing, he asked, barely. You okay? No, but I'm ready. I told him about Gloria, the flash drive, the footage. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You know what you have to do, right? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, don't just clear your name, he said. End the script she's writing. The next morning was the wedding, the final act. And I was holding the last page of the script she hadn't written. The air on Sunday morning was impossibly still, like the whole estate was holding its breath. A low haze clung to the trees, and from my window I could see the white chairs lined up in perfect rows. The altar was framed in blush roses and eucalyptus. Valerie's initials glimmered on the entry sign in faux gold calligraphy. The stage was set. And this time, I wasn't just part of the background. I dressed deliberately, navy silk, subtle earrings, no jewelry that could sparkle too loud. Everything about me said quiet dignity, but inside a war drum was pounding in my chest. I slipped the flash drive into a small clutch. It felt heavier than it should, maybe because it carried the truth. At 1:20 p.m., I joined the guests filing into the garden. I sat on the bride's side, 3rd row. I recognized most of the faces. Many had watched me grow up. None of them had ever really seen me. Valerie arrived late on brand. She floated down the brick path in a strapless gown veil draped over one shoulder like a fashion editorial. The crowd audibly sighed. One bridesmaid was already crying. She clutched her bouquet tightly. Too tightly, she knew. I'd taken the bracelet from the bouquet bag the night before after showing Gloria the footage. The staffer had nodded solemnly and said, She's going to flip. I didn't know if Gloria meant Valerie or me, probably both. Now standing at the edge of the altar, Valerie looked poised but tight, her smile too strained, her eyes scanning the crowd too often. I looked at Trevor. He stood stiff, pale. Something in him had shifted since the rehearsal dinner. He no longer looked like a man about to be married. He looked like a man about to be sentenced. Just before the vows, Valerie turned toward her planner and whispered sharply. The planner's face blanched. She darted behind the altar and reappeared seconds later. Then whispered something to Trevor. He blinked. "The bouquet's missing. I set it down backstage. Someone moved it," Valerie said tightly. And that's when I stood. "Valerie," I said calmly, "you asked me to speak today. I think now's the right time." Every head turned. A ripple passed through the crowd. I walked toward the altar, the grass soft beneath my heels. The planner stepped toward me as if to intercept. Trevor gently blocked her with his hand. "Let her." I climbed the 2 small steps to the platform, pulled my laptop from my tote, and connected the HDMI cord the AV tech had left dangling for the photo slideshow. Valerie's voice rang out behind me. "Marla, this isn't the right moment." I didn't turn, just said into the mic. "Then you shouldn't have made it the setting for your lies." A unified gasp from somewhere near the back. I clicked play. The screen lit up. Ballroom cam 3:12:11 p.m. MP4. The image came into focus. Valerie in a silk robe slipping into the bridal dressing room alone. She looked up at the camera, smiled. Someone gasped. She knew someone muttered. We all watched as she took the bracelet out of her pocket and carefully slid it into the side of her bouquet bag. Deliberate, measured. She fluffed the bouquet, smoothed her robe, and walked out. It was damning in its precision. Valerie had framed me on camera. I clicked pause, then turned to face the guests. "I didn't want to do this here," I said, voice steady. But after years of being painted as the jealous sister, the difficult one, the unreliable one, this was the only place it would matter. Valerie stood frozen, bouquetless veil fluttering in the breeze. Trevor stepped forward slowly. "You planted it," he asked her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her face had gone an unnatural shade of white. Trevor looked down, shook his head. "Wow." Then to me, "Thank you." And just like that, he walked away from the altar. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone clapped. And another. Not a standing ovation, not yet. But something cracked, a boundary broken, a lie deflated in real time. One bridesmaid peeled off quietly. Another sat down on the lawn, hand over her mouth. Valerie remained at the altar frozen, her empire crumbling behind her eyes. I walked off the platform through the crowd. No one stopped me. No one said a word. The path cleared like parted water. As I reached the exit gate, I heard Aunt Bernice behind me, voice clear as crystal well. "That's the most honest wedding I've ever attended." The morning after the wedding that wasn't felt like waking up in a foreign country. The once buzzing estate was quiet now. Chairs half folded, flower petals strewn like abandoned promises across the brick path. A server loaded crates of untouched champagne flutes into a van. Somewhere inside, Valerie had sealed herself behind the locked door of her bridal suite and refused to come out. Honestly, no one was knocking. I found Mom in the kitchen sipping coffee like she hadn't witnessed her youngest daughter implode on screen in front of 200 people. She didn't look up when I walked in. "You could have handled that differently," she said. Not a greeting, not a question, just judgment. I blinked, stunned at her calm. "Differently, like how you humiliated her." I nearly laughed. She planted evidence to frame me. She tried to have me publicly shamed, and you're worried about her embarrassment. Mom finally looked up. Her eyes didn't soften. "You didn't have to make it public." Ah, there it was. Not anger at Valerie for lying, not regret, just discomfort that the mess had been made visible. that the fantasy of their perfect daughter, perfect wedding, perfect family, had cracked. She was upset that I'd forced people to see the truth. "I didn't make this public," I said slowly. "Valerie did. I just made sure no one else got crushed by it." Dad appeared halfway through the conversation, rubbing his temples. "Let's all take a breath," he muttered. "What's done is done." But nothing in his face looked like a man who wanted resolution. Only distance, diplomacy. The same man who let Valerie control every family dinner and gave me the look whenever I asked for space to speak. I stared at both of them, feeling something ancient click into place. I was never the daughter they protected. I was the daughter they managed, but not everyone saw it that way. Aunt Bernice walked in moments later, her sandals slapping against the kitchen tile. "Well, that was a long time coming," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee like it was any other Sunday. Mom glared, "Bernice, please." But Bernice just sipped. "Oh, calm down, Patricia. Your golden girl finally got called on her nonsense. I say about time." She turned to me and winked. "Proud of you, kiddo." And in that moment, just that moment, I felt seen. Not pitied, not misunderstood, just acknowledged. By Monday afternoon, Valerie's entire online footprint had gone ghost. The Instagram page with 237K followers gone. The wedding countdown reels deleted. The sponsored content for her bridal skincare line unlinked. She vanished. Some speculated honeymoon delay, some guessed cold feet. But those closest knew. The image had cracked. The algorithm had no mercy. No edit, no filter, no caption could save her from what a security camera had captured with no agenda. She tried to script a redemption arc. But I'd already uploaded the ending. I flew home in silence. No goodbye hug from Mom. No call from Dad. A single final text from Valerie at 2:17 a.m. "You didn't have to actually show it, but I guess you had to. No apology, no ownership. Just disbelief that I'd finally chosen myself." Back in Seattle, my apartment felt different. Not bigger, not cleaner, but freer. The kind of freedom you only earn after years of shrinking to make others comfortable. I didn't unpack right away. I made tea, opened the windows, and let the stillness seep into me. It wasn't loneliness. It was clarity. No voices telling me I was too sensitive. No games, no roles to play. Just me. Work welcomed me back like nothing had happened, though Eli gave me the longest hug I'd ever gotten outside an HR safe zone. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a stack of compliance audits and said, "It's good to have your brain back." 2 weeks later, I was called into the director's office. "We're restructuring," she began. "And we want you to lead the Community Integrity Initiative as Associate Vice President." I blinked, not because I didn't feel ready, but because I finally realized I didn't need a family pedestal to stand tall. I just needed a voice and my own permission to use it. For years, I thought protecting people meant staying small. That if I kept the peace eventually, someone would reach back and pull me into the light. But I learned something else in Charleston. Sometimes you don't get pulled into the light. You walk into it. Alone. On purpose. And that's enough. 3 months after the wedding, that wasn't an email arrived in my inbox. No subject line, just a familiar name in the sender field. Valerie Covington. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure if I should open it. But curiosity has a way of peeling your finger toward a mousepad before your pride can object. I clicked. Inside was one sentence. "I didn't think you'd actually show the video. But maybe you had to." That was it. No greeting, no signature. Just that flat, stunned admission. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. But for someone like Valerie, who had always treated consequence like an allergic reaction, it was the closest I'd ever get to closure. And somehow, it was enough. After that, I didn't look back. Instead, I wrote. First, it was just journaling, capturing moments I'd buried under years of keeping quiet. The way it felt to be cut out of planning conversations. The way Mom would say, "Let's not start drama," whenever I tried to name something that hurt. Then I started writing about boundaries. Integrity, how protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel, it makes you sane. One day on a whim, I submitted an op-ed to a regional professional women's magazine. I titled it, "How to Speak When You've Been Trained to Stay Silent." 2 weeks later, the editor replied, "We'd love to run this in our winter issue. Your voice is needed." When the story went live, I didn't expect much. But the emails started almost immediately. Women I'd never met poured into my inbox with versions of their own silence. Stories of sisters who stole mothers who denied workplaces that punished them for being too vocal or not vocal enough. And nearly every message ended the same way, "Thank you." I thought it was just me. A month after the article came out, I was invited to speak at a Women in Ethics conference in Chicago. The keynote had dropped out. They needed someone who could talk about compliance, but also courage, not just policy, but personal firewalls. I packed 2 blazers and more nervous energy than I'd felt in a decade. When I walked on stage, the ballroom was full corporate lawyers, nonprofit leaders, HR directors. I cleared my throat and said, "We're taught that families teach us love, but sometimes families teach us silence. And in that silence, lies grow, until they convince you that truth is rude and boundaries are betrayal." A row of women in the front nodded before I even reached the second paragraph. After my talk, a woman with silver hair and tired eyes came up to me near the coffee urn. She didn't say anything right away, just handed me her card, which read, "Lila Monroe, Director, Midwestern Trauma Survivors Network." Then she looked me in the eye and said, "Your speech helped me finally set boundaries with my sister. Thank you." And just like that, something cracked wide open in me, not in a painful way, but like the sound of chains breaking far off in the woods. Funny how you can spend years thinking no one sees you. You shrink, soften, edit yourself. You avoid taking up space in rooms where someone might accuse you of being too much or not enough. But sometimes all it takes is one mic, one truth, one moment where you don't look away from the discomfort. And suddenly your voice echoes. Valerie and I haven't spoken since the email. She moved back to LA from what I hear. The influencer deals dried up. She started a side hustle coaching resilience and reinvention, ironic considering, but I don't stalk her pages anymore. I don't need to. My healing has nothing to do with whether or not she learns the lesson. It has everything to do with the fact that I did. Today I mentor young women in my organization. I've started a discussion group called Quiet No More, where we talk about boundary-setting self-trust and surviving families who rewrite history. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we laugh at how ridiculous our stories are when said out loud. But mostly, we reclaim space together. And if I have learned anything, it's this. They can take the mic from you, but they can't take the truth. And when you finally speak, really speak, not just to be heard, but to stand, you never give it back.